Hey, what's going on there, folks? Welcome back. Welcome back here to a Wednesday. It is the Earthmaster here. June 5th, 2024 is the date, about 10:37 a.m. here, California time. Latest activity on the globe shows a 3.2 over here across the area of the Indonesia Islands region. Also a 2.8 hiding in that area as well. We did see some movement ramping up here south of the border here earlier this morning, with a pretty intense earthquake swarm striking on the Imperial Fault, which is, of course, an extensional plate boundary here that runs into the San Andreas Fault here. A decent amount of earthquake activity ramping up, beginning, it looks like it started around just after midnight, and then just continued over the next few hours here, with the last earthquake occurring about 7 o'clock my time here with a 0.8. Really no main quake to start off the sequence of earthquakes here. Very similar to the swarms that we've seen out here recently in the area. Most of the time we'll see like a 4.8, and then of course there's going to be aftershock activity, right, with a bunch of swarming potentially following that main quake, but there's really no main quake out here. The largest, though, in this sequence of events is going to be a 4.6. So if you want to call it the main quake, so be it. But I look at it as what started this, what kicked off this swarming as a main quake, instead of just seeing a larger quake in the mix of all these other earthquakes here. That's a sign that we could be looking at something bigger in my book. And if you look at, the past couple weeks here, we've seen various swarms up and down the plate boundary here, anywhere from the Brawley seismic zone south, inland, and the Los Angeles area as well. The last 7 days of earthquake activity really doesn't show the decent amount of swarming. We got to go back the last couple weeks here. And it may seem a little cluttered out here, but I'll try to pinpoint some specific areas. Here's our newest one, right, that began this morning. If you look here, roughly in the same area last month here in about middle May, we've seen a decent amount of earthquake swarming here as well. So with really no main quake. Similar type of event that's going on here, with just a bunch of swarming kicking up out of the blue. And down south here, further into the Baja California as well, we've seen a little separate swarming going on there. And that's a decent amount of earthquake activity in that region, about 34 earthquakes in a little sequence of similar swarm patterns. And of course down here, can't really see it on this map, but on the EMSC model, we'd see other earthquake activity up and down here in the plate boundary in the Gulf of California, all leading up to this activity that we're seeing even today. Here in the Brawley seismic zone, we've seen its own earthquake swarm with about 300 earthquakes there last month. Now that's a lot of activity, and really no main quake in that sequence either. So you look at all these little, and that's just, let me go over here and show you a couple more. There's another swarm over here near the Octillo Wells area. A little bit from today, a 0.8, and most of this activity from last month as well. But various swarming patterns out here in specific locations tells me that this is an overall regional stress event here. And when we get this regional stress event taking place, we have to watch areas that are well overdue in terms of, potential release of strain, because obviously the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault here has been locked and loaded for quite a while. Been over 300 years since we've seen a full rupture of the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault that's capable of producing an 8.1 earthquake. So all these little swarming patterns here could be leading to something. It's not just in one area, right? I could say if it was just right here, we've seen a little bit of swarming. Okay, maybe we're going to see something bigger specifically within this area, but this is an overall regional stress event taking place out here right up against the plate boundary here, which remains quiet. Little bit of movement on the North American side of the plate boundary. That in itself tells me that it's still quite strained. Obviously it's strained. We haven't released any pressure out here. So all these swarms could be leading to something much bigger in my book. And there's been other swarms here. If you look out here in just north here, in between the plate boundary and the San Jacinto Fault. Actually, this is the northern end of the San Jacinto Fault zone, seeing its own swarming pattern. But this is a pretty lengthy fault that does accumulate quite a bit of strain, similar to the Elsinore Fault. But of course, all this does brush up here against the plate boundary itself. That's where the most of the strain right now is located. And of course, what's it going to take here to trigger the big one out here? Will it take all these little swarm patterns, or will it take maybe one little one-pointer here to trigger the big one? Southern branch of the San Andreas Fault is a very dangerous monster, and these little earthquake events taking place out here is a little concerning. So we'll keep an eye on that. The Imperial Fault, of course, last seen its earthquake. If you guys remember back in 2010, the Baja California earthquake that struck directly on the Imperial Fault with a 7.2 earthquake. Pretty decent sized earthquake there. And looks like it occurred on the Laguna Salada, right? Salada Fault. Let me see here. That's a different type of fault system here. But if you look here, distinct earthquake sequences having two main shocks. So it looked like it did occur very close to the Imperial Fault, but specifically on its own fault system here, which is the Laguna Salada Fault. Back then it did have several foreshocks, it looks like. 2010, magnitudes of 3 and 4. So that's what I'm saying. These little swarms could be definitely be triggering some, or could be a sign of some bigger quake activity out here. Either way, not necessarily concerned about the Imperial Fault. Yes, there is some swarming going on this fault system, but the regional stress out here, like I mentioned, has been of interest, because it's not only on this plate boundary right here, it's various locations across a wide region, all brushing up here against the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. That is the big story, big deal, and we'll continue to watch that. Further away from this area, got a couple earthquakes in the last hour, 1.4 coming in on the San Jacinto Fault Zone, and also up north here, the Garlock Fault Shear Zone. I think this one acts as a spring, to be honest, and a little bit more dangerous than what people think. This is a shear type fault that basically separates here and crisscrosses the plate boundary itself, which is a right lateral type fault, transform fault here that runs pretty much northwest to southeast on the map. And I think this area is a lot more dangerous and closely related to what goes on here across the San Andreas Fault than what most people believe. So I think one or the other could trigger each other here in terms of larger scale movement. It kind of makes sense here. Acts as a spring, as the North American plate in itself here is moving off towards the direction here towards the southeast, while the Pacific area here along the plate boundary to the northwest. That should act as some type of major spring, in a sense. But I think this in itself can produce a large earthquake. It's been a while since we've seen large earthquake activity on this fault zone. The Ridgecrest earthquake was up on the Airport Fault, or one of these little lake faults. I can't remember which one, back in 2019 when we had that 6.9 and the 7-pointer up here. But we'll continue to watch that. I'm going to leave up the earthquake watch because they haven't calmed down. There's a lot going on out here across the Pacific plate. Further up north, we got all the activity there across the Cascadia subduction zone, where we've been seeing a decent amount of tremor out there in the last week or so. It actually goes back past the last week, talking about almost 2,000 epicenters of tremor here at the southern end of the Cascadia. And the earthquakes themselves are becoming more prominent up here. And, it's just a matter of time as well. Been over 324 years since the last rupture out here, the full rupture of the Cascadia. And it's just pretty much on a geological time bomb out here, so to speak. There's so much that can take place, and we've just been advancing in society and civilization lately. Communications are everywhere, that we've gotten comfortable and complacent that what can take place out here can put us back a while. It can set us back a good distance in terms of our advancements. So a 9-pointer out here, an 8.1 in Southern California, yeah, that would wreak havoc, not only locally here, but I'm sure across the world, as transportation and whatnot, and exports and imports and whatnot would be affected. Not to mention the giant tsunamis that would be produced. So here's all the earthquake activity occurring. Southern end of the Cascadia, above the tremor level, about 28 kilometers deep here. Tremor occurs further down dip into the subduction zone, where we've seen on the map here. That's about 45 kilometers deep. So more tremor positioned on the southern end than any other place up here across the Cascadia in the last week. The last month, decent amount. We've been pretty consistent, but look where it's all at. Let me put the search up here. The majority of it's still quite a bit into the southern end. Slight amount up north, but this extends further up into the Queen Charlotte Sound area. So we'll continue to watch the southern end of the Cascadia. That's got over 6,000 epicenters here in the last month. Not earthquakes, but these are slow slip type events that occur downstream of a subduction zone. And a lot of people, I tend to think that this adds further strain, right? At the locked areas upstream. It may be temporarily relieving stress there in that specific area where it's at, way down there. But ultimately, while the portion of the plate is slowly subducting deeper, it's got to be adding further strain upstream here. It only makes sense. So elevated tremor activity, I think, means elevated potentials and chances of seeing larger scale earthquake activity. Larger scale. We're already seeing at the smaller scale here, as we've seen in the last week or so across the southern end of the Cascadia. I even had one up here around the Cascadia Basin area. That earthquake at the surface level, 1.6. So gotta watch it. A lot going on out here right now. Mount St. Helens seeing some earthquake activity as well. Just a little bit of earthquakes at the summit area. This area has seen some swarming as well. About almost close to 100 earthquakes in the last month. They've had a similar swarm back here last year, roughly in July or August. I can't remember which month it was, but definitely seen some, I think recharging of the system there. Well, that's another area to watch here for volcanic activity. Of course, subduction zone, volcanoes. Yeah, kind of makes sense, right? Some movement up across the Utah area as well. See, there's some further activity down in the Gulf of California as well, just after midnight. That does look like it stirred up the activity here because it was just after midnight. Zoom in a little bit here. About 1 o'clock in the morning is when things really kicked off out here. So following this movement down south here, where we've seen activity recently, does look like it's add further strain up here. So I think key to watching elevated activity is what's going on down here across the Gulf of California, adding some further strain upstream here. And it looks like it just cuts off right here. There's a little linear state right here across these mountains, San Gabriel Mountains and the San Bernardino Mountain range, all compacted right here in this area. Yellowstone National Park, let's see what's going on there real quick. Looks like some more wind events coming in here, and long duration wind events each afternoon. That's and I'll show you guys real quick what I mean. So as you can see on the windy map here, this is a current statement. We got almost 50 mile per hour gust up here. So I'm sure higher at some of these other exposed locations. So, there's a little bit over here, but it does look like some of these haven't picked up the wind events yet. A little bit right here, Grant Village, And I'm talking about this background noise right there. That's the wind that's being picked up. And it picks up in the afternoon and then dies back down at night. And, it shows up there on the seismograph stations. But as far as any earthquake activity goes, it's really non-existent right now across Yellowstone. Yes, Yellowstone does see some swarming on occasion, but to be honest, it's been somewhat quiet. Texas oil fields still getting hit out here, it looks like. Oklahoma, there's that one little lonesome earthquake up here in the upper New York State area with that 2.5 from yesterday. So far as the rest of the globe here goes, got some movement down in the South Sandwich Trench here. Pretty shallow, though. 7 kilometers for 5.5. 3 o'clock this morning. And a handful of earthquakes there into the South America region. That's expected following all this divergent boundary activity out here recently, amplifying conditions across the Peru-Chile Trench and down south here, it looks like. Got another one-pointer coming into the area. The Big Island of Hawaii, looks like we got some further activity out here in terms of earthquake movement. So let's go check this out real quick, see what's going on across the Kilauea volcano, which is still at an orange and a watch level. Of course, the eruption halted not yesterday, but the day before here. Let's see what we got for the most recent update, which was put out yesterday, so really no new update yet. Volcanic tremor still occurring. It continues to be recorded on summit seismograph stations here through earthquake activity and rates of ground deformation. Although they state that remains low in the region. So let's go check it out and see for ourselves. We're going back up. I wouldn't say it's low. It looks like it's kicked back up into gear here. This is the last 2 days. The eruption right here. Notice, if you follow this trend, this is the last month here. Each stair-stepping event going higher than the one before, indicating, gradual increase in inflation here each period. And in our last amplified period, that's when we've seen the eruption take place. And, of course, a decent drop in inflation, which, of course, it makes sense, right? There was a little bit of magma that broke through the surface to create these lava flows there, but it didn't last long. Look at that. We're going back up here now. We only lost maybe about a week's worth of magma accumulation. And this is only the last month. If you look at the last year, look how high we are still. We're way up there. Last 5 years, we're still extremely elevated. More so since the last eruption there back in 2018 when we had the East Rift Zone pop out there. So things are getting interesting. That is quite dynamic. Going to watch this pretty closely. A view of the area of interest does show some volcanic gases still out there across the eruption zone. That's way out there. The visual perspective shows it way out here. It's nowhere close to this camera, but that's as close as they put it. So, there's a lot going on underneath this area right now. Seismograph stations here does show some small earthquake activity. It does look a little bit more active today than what it did, but of course with the ongoing inflation now, the key to watching is where's this going to go? Are we going to see a magma intrusion somewhere else? Are we going to see another fissure event take place out here? I think with those giant cracks out there recently that we're going to see something larger take place out here, a more active show in the Southwest Rift Zone. That little crack is just barely a little crack in terms of what's capable out here right now in terms of the inflation. A little one-pointer coming in up north here a little bit. There in Southern California. I wanted to see where that was at specifically. New Zealand, deep activity underneath this area continues with a 4.8 underneath the North Island, almost 200 kilometers deep there early this morning. We've been getting a lot of deep activity here, folks. Hikurangi subduction zone sits right offshore here. Seems like everyone's got their sleeping monster that sits in the backyard or quietly somewhere, maybe in the closet or just off on the fence line. Well, this is New Zealand's sleeping giant, sleeping monster, and it's capable of producing some mega quakes. And of course, when that happens, that's not going to be good. right? Don't need to go into details what's going to happen, but it's been quite a while since these guys have seen a mega quake out here across the subduction zone. Obviously, other plate boundaries, fault systems have seen their shares of large earthquakes, but this one's capable of producing a much larger activity. And of course, with this deeper movement here recently, there's a lot going on here. This is a decent sized quake underneath the area. So we'll continue to watch that. That's definitely a little scary there to see further large scale deep activity taking place. It almost looks like there's a 4.8. So there's a 5. EMSC shown as a 5-pointer. Also a 3.9 in there as well. Some deeper movement taking place. Some adjustment across the plate boundary South Island here, but it's got to move, right? It's going to have to adjust, and when it does, it's going to be a big one. So just best be prepared out there across New Zealand. Most of this activity here from yesterday, we did see a 5.4, a little bit further up off the coast here of Sumatra. Notice the trail of activity making its way slowly but surely up around the plate boundary as expected. Still a pretty decent gap up here around the Andaman Sea northward here, so we'll continue to watch that. We have seen most of the activity back here prior to today's new earthquake, but that leaves a seismic gap up this way. Further activity out in eastern Afghanistan. Deeper movement quake, followed up by some surface adjustment there across that area. Back and forth. That's very typical for that region. Turkey seeing a little bit of activity out here as well with a 4.1 just after midnight. Way down here in Angola area, it looks like a 5.1 coming in. That's a little odd, right? I don't recall the last time I've seen an earthquake way up here, but let me see what we got. Looks like they have had some earthquake activity out here historically, but it's not on a major plate boundary or rift zone. I see at least one little earthquake of similar magnitude, maybe a little bit smaller, 4.5 to 5-pointer historically, but that's about it. A little odd. The Atlantic Ocean, aside from that movement down south, let's check out Iceland, see if anything's changed up there. Down to 15 earthquakes. Really not a whole lot going on there. I'm sure we're still seeing the eruption, so let's go see what's up here from the live from Iceland.is site. Pretty cool site to check out. Beautiful images of Iceland. I've never been up there. I would love to get up there one of these days and see not only the volcanic activity, but just the general landscape. Iceland has so much geology history up there. It's a paradise for a geologist. Still seeing some fountaining going on here from at least this one active volcano, active vent. So I'm not for sure if we're down. It almost looks like we're just down to one right now. Still got some volcanic gases as expected out there. But let's see. Have we got any new updates from the Icelandic Meteorological Office? This one was put out yesterday. So yeah, they mentioned right here one active crater remains out here. They are talking about turn that off. That things are subsiding. So that means right here that this eruption could be short-lived, and then we could have a decent break before another one takes place there. We've been watching these come and go since last year. I want to check out the inflation charts out here and see what we got here for today. You know, unlike last time during the eruption here, back in March, we've seen the continued inflation take place there during the ongoing eruption. This time, depletion is going on here. We're still out of downturn. I know last night we had one little runtime here that went up and the little red dot, but it looks like we're back down now. So we're going to have to watch this. If this continues to stay downward, then we're looking at a depletion of the supply of magma from the deeper areas below. During the eruption here last time, we've seen continued supply and demand of inflation right there, and that's why the eruption lasted so long. This one may be a little bit different, so we'll have to watch that. Definitely interesting, though. Space weather activity out here. Did see a little bit of M flare activity here from sunspot 3697, which, well, I think it's still active, right? Obviously, it's still active, but it's going through a tired phase, right? Eventually, we all get to that point of just being a little bit tired, tiredness going on here. We just want to take a break or just retire. And that's kind of what looks like is going on here with this sunspot. There's not a whole lot of complexity going on now. This is that sunspot that produced the historic aurora show last month, with numerous CMEs and numerous X flares. It's absolutely crazy to witness. I'm glad a lot of us caught it. A lot of us missed it, though. It was a once-in-a-lifetime event, potentially, to see the auroras as low as they were during that event. So we'll continue to watch that. It did produce a little bit of M flare activity this morning. This sunspot here looking like a little separation going on, so not really expecting much from that. And aside from that, there's really not a whole lot of other interesting sunspots out there. On the far side of the sun here, we do have, this is about a day behind, but 3683 here is coming around the eastern limb. That's an interesting area. It's quite large, but hard to tell how dynamic it is until it gets over here into the visual view. But we do have a couple different spots here that we'll watch in the coming days and weeks as they come around the eastern limb of the sun. Right now, it looks like we may be seeing just a little visual glimpse of it. Not the full sunspot there, but it doesn't look all that complex, at least from here. But we'll keep a close eye on that. The overall threat right now, 25% chance for X flare, M flare at 60, C flare around 99% chance or so. But I don't think we're going to see any more X flares from that sunspot. It just looks like it's going through a little resting period here, or potentially just degrading altogether. No major auroras in the forecast, and it looks like there was a filament eruption out there on the northeastern quadrant. When was this? Maybe last night, 17:30 UTC time, right? Well, 17:30 UTC time would just be recent. So let's see here. Oh, there it is right there. Check that out. Beautiful. Huge plasma. Let's see if we can bring up the movie here of that eruption. Oh, yeah, look at that. Huge plasma. Not Earth directed, though, unfortunately. A lot of times these things that are sitting here, these filaments that are kind of just positioned on the sun here, can get easily blasted off with a large, huge cloud of plasma. Not going to be associated in the Earth-directed view, I don't think. That is incredible, to say the least there. Wow. But let me see here. Yeah, off of the Earth-Sun line, so way over there to the east. But something like that would produce a a decent aurora show as well. So we have many opportunities and near hits, I should say, to see something awesome as far as the auroras go. But yeah, well, we'll continue to watch it, see what takes place out here on the sun. Either way, it's been quite active, and we're well above. I think they put out the new update here. Yeah, this was updated. This is for May. Notice, of course, all those sunspots there back in May, right? All the CME activity, all the aurora activity. We're way back up here again in terms of being above what was forecasted originally here. Peak solar cycle 25 is supposed to be in 2025, about June or so. So we still have, a good year for some elevated space weather activity here. And again, we're way up there, way above what was originally forecasted. Far as thunderstorms go, not a whole lot of severe weather out there. I think a lot of people are happy about that. Only a marginal risk here across various areas, a 2% chance for tornado probability in these regions here in the green. Wind, maybe some hail out there, but there's really not a lot out here in terms of any setups, in terms of any major severe weather threats, which is good. These guys need a breakout here. All right, folks, I am going to jump off here. Seismograph stations out here look pretty quiet for now. We'll keep an eye on SoCal, Southern California, just because of this elevated activity here working its way up to plate boundary. Haven't really seen any significant swarming north of here, but these similar patterns that we've seen over the last few weeks, they follow a little trend here of swarming down. It all starts down south here in this area, then works its way up north with some swarming areas, and then we'll see various swarming areas following this activity. So we'll watch this today, see if things don't kick up. Hopefully the big one doesn't happen, but obviously we're 1 day, 1 minute, 1 second closer to the big one out here in Southern California, and it's inevitable. It will strike. Hopefully, everyone's prepared and has an earthquake plan for when it does take place, because it's going to be chaotic. All right, we'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later on this evening, folks, for the Wednesday night update. Take care and enjoy your day. Stay cool out there. I got ACs on full blast in here because it's a hot one. It's supposed to be about 108 degrees here in Northern California over the next week or so. Maybe even hotter. Goodness. Take care, folks. Stay safe out there.